Hey, Tamir Borman. This is another episode of the Talent Tango Podcast. On this week, I have with me Angela Mayhew. She's been at FabFitFun. See, I got through that for 3 years, where she has helped the company grow from 50 employees to over 650. And as one of the first recruiting people team hires, she has witnessed firsthand what it takes to scale during a continuous hypergrowth stage. Prior to FabFitFun, Angela's worked in recruiting functions across many industries, including entertainment, SaaS, and sports. She's originally from Upstate New York, received a bachelor's degree in communication journalism from St. John Fisher College. Thanks for being on, Angela.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned as soon as I brought up the FabFitFun, we had an employee perk up and was super excited. So I'm excited.
That's what I love to hear. And I think that's one of the coolest parts about working for a B2C company is that, when you do resonate and have a specific brand, and when you mention like where you work, people get so excited.
Absolutely. So help us understand how you ended up in recruiting and kind of just what got you in here, what made you stick to the point where you're at now.
Exactly. So that is a great question because no one, dreams as a child of being a recruiter, and there's no recruiting major in college. So how does one get here? So originally from upstate New York, I went to school in Rochester, New York, and I had these big dreams of, one day, like since I was really young, living and working in like quote unquote, like Hollywood, California, Los Angeles, and being from upstate New York and like no connections out there. I was like, how am I going to do that? So this was in 2006, 2007, I was Googling, summer internships in LA and how to get there. And I found this program. At the time, it was called University of Dreams. And I was like, oh, like perfect. Like, because at that time I wanted to do broadcasting, communications journalism, and I wasn't going to get the experience that I wanted, in upstate New York through an internship at a news station. I wanted something more like fun, entertainment. So long story short, I ended up participating in this internship program where I interned at Scout Productions in Los Angeles in between my junior and senior year of college. It was Scout Productions. They're most known for doing Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. And it was my first time being like west of Ohio, and being in LA. It was like the best culture shock, but still like a culture shock in terms of not only California, Los Angeles, but also like quote unquote the industry. And I quickly realized like, wow, like if you want to make it in entertainment and broadcasting, you have to really want this like 200%. And I think I was very self-aware and it's like, oh, like I think I only want this like 75 or 80%. And I saw how much like other people were like in it to win it. I'm like, yikes, I don't know if that's me. But like during the course of this 8-week internship program, I fell more in love with the actual internship program than my internship. Like I thought it was so cool that this company was bringing, there was about 300 college students from not only across the US, but globally as well, where this company placed them in internships in fields of their choice and brought them all together, and not only had a fun professional experience, but also personally getting them acclimated to LA, a lot of like early career development, doing like fun excursions, and just fell in love with the program, helping people's like dreams come true, as cheesy as that sounds. And so after the program was over, I went back to school. I was a campus rep because I believed in like a brand ambassador. I believed in the company so much and did a really great job that they invited me to be a staff member. And I thought that would be such a great way to come back and help be a counselor, if you will, for the LA program and figure out what I wanted next in my LA journey. And again, like it quickly realized that how much I was like really loving helping people get their dreams and going after these goals and aspirations that they had and helping them with these like early career pieces, whether it be interviewing, resumes, making connections, networking. And, flash forward, the company actually offered me a full-time position to help run and recruit the LA internship program. And like such started my career in internships. And I didn't really know what recruiting was at the time, but after like my experience with University of Dreams, a friend had reached out to me that she was looking to backfill her position at Universal Music Group for a recruiting coordinator, and she needed someone that had experience running internship programs for college students. And I was like, oh, well, like I definitely have done that the past few years. And then so started my journey as a recruiting coordinator at Universal Music Group, and the rest was history.
Wow. Just pretty amazing that you walked into one thing and you pretty much fell in love with another, and there it was.
Exactly. Like I love helping people. I love connecting with people. And I also just love being a brand ambassador, like for anything, like what I'm passionate about, whether it be a podcast, a TV show, a type of lipstick or a company. So for me, I thought that was really exciting. And I felt like with recruiting, I was able to use a lot of my communications journalism background in that in terms of as a broadcast major, like interviewing, that's a huge part of what I do now, as well as the other aspects of, marketing as well and writing with like the job descriptions, LinkedIn and all of that. So it's been really fun.
That's awesome. Yeah. You know, what's interesting is I ask that question pretty consistently. Everyone always answers that, nobody dreams of becoming a recruiter, but there's always a trigger point where somebody realizes that they just enjoy the people component and that part of it just fuels them to just stay, which is pretty cool.
Exactly. And, being a problem solver as well. Like I've had so much fun at FabFitFun, really connecting with the different hiring groups and being part of the hyper growth of like really building upon something and helping provide value to the company through finding, the best fit for these hiring managers.
That's exactly like I'm a big proponent of recruiters. Obviously, I'm external, you're internal. Either way, I'm always telling people that we are solving a business problem. We're just not finding a person for a role. We're actually solving a problem. So I love hearing that.
Awesome.
So help me understand one thing. So when you joined FabFitFun, I'm getting more comfortable saying that, by the way, now.
Yeah.
I like it. It just rolls off the tongue now.
Right?
Like there were only 50 employees. And I asked this question because a lot of people who are working at startups or they're evaluating getting into it, I'm always asking, how did you know like that was going to be the one? Or is it you just fell in love with the company you joined and the growth is just a byproduct of being there? Like, did you know you were onto something big up front or did it just kind of materialize for you once you got into the door of FabFitFun?
It is crazy. Like I had no idea. I thought I was joining this cute little startup and I had no idea what was going to be in store, but it's been such a fun, wild ride. And it's crazy because with FabFitFun, most people know us for our seasonal subscription box, which started in spring 2013, I believe, but it had actually, the company started 3 years prior in a partnership with Juliana Rancic as a email newsletter. So I had actually been a fan of the brand like years before I applied. And it's funny looking at, the different apps like Time Hop. It's like, oh, you tweeted about FabFitFun like 8 years ago, or you were engaged with the company 8 years ago. It's like, wow, who would have known 5 years later I would have joined the company. And, before that, kind of with my career trajectory, starting with Universal Music Group, I went from corporate to startup, corporate, and now again, back to startup with FabFitFun. I always say that you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once. And it's learning between the corporate environments and the startup environments, what was important to me at certain times and what was beneficial, what was needed for my growth. And at the time when I was working in sports in a very corporate environment, and I thought I had wanted something more, structured at the time, more stable than a startup. But I was like, no, I think I really need to get back into the startup environment where I can be really innovative and creative and people were open to ideas and building something from nothing. And again, really being that problem solver, not to say there's not problems in corporate structured environments, but they're just different sort of problems. So at the time I was really, hungry for another startup environment. And with FabFitFun, I, had already been familiar with the brand. I'm obsessed with women's lifestyle, everything, beauty YouTubers, fitness, health, beauty, fashion, all of that. So I was really passionate about the product, which I think is really important when you are recruiting. And then also just for logistics wise, previously I've had pretty long, treacherous commutes and FabFitFun was in West Hollywood. I lived in West Hollywood. There was cold brew and kombucha on tap. I was sold. So I thought I was joining this again, cute startup that I only had a less than a 10-minute commute. I loved the products. I would get a free box and there would be cold brew on tap. What more did I need? Little did I know that over the course of 3 years, we would go from 50 to over 650 and what it would become today. So very lucky. And as they say, #blessed.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, that's the great intersection of knowing the brand. I mean, the commutes there. Obviously, I'm a fan of cold brew and I've gotten into kombucha recently. I love it when it all comes together and someone's genuinely it all just fits the puzzle pieces and someone's really just happy about where they're at. That's fantastic.
Exactly.
So let me ask you a question to kind of like unpack a little bit of you've been there now for a couple of years. You experienced the hyper growth. To take a step back, so you obviously had done different type of recruiting roles, some B2B, B2C. You guys have a super strong brand. What do you see as the main difference when you were working, let's say at Moment Feed and in a B2B capacity versus now at FabFitFun, like a complete B2C, people know the brand. What's challenges does one represent versus the other?
Yeah, definitely. And this is something that I try to really connect my recruiting team with. For some people, it might be their like first or second job within recruiting, and just like highlighting that sometimes like what's happening here at FabFitFun isn't like quote unquote like normal or to be expected like at other companies. With FabFitFun, if I'm sending 10 emails on LinkedIn, I'll probably get 9 or 10 responses back. And even if people aren't interested in the opportunity, they're like, oh, not interested, happy where I am, but like love FabFitFun, or my wife loves FabFitFun, or loves the boxes, like would love to keep in touch for the future. So that sometimes can be really easy, getting people's attention, getting responses back. And, with those passive candidates, it's like, well, FabFitFun's really cool, or my wife won't stop talking about it, I'll take the call. So that lends to be a little bit easier. Whereas at Moment Feed, when I would send maybe 10 LinkedIn messages, I'd be lucky if I got 1 or 2 because people didn't know what that was. So you had to be more strategic when crafting the message to get people excited and doing a little bit more showcasing on what the company was, especially when it was B2B and what problems you would be solving, and trying to find other ways that would motivate people to be excited. Maybe it was like a technical thing that they would be working on. Maybe it was they'd be building something from nothing, or they liked smaller environments. So it was definitely much more challenging, and even like structuring like phone screens. Whereas like with FabFitFun, you don't really have to go through as much the song and dance up front of like, this is who we are and why you should be excited. Fun is in the name. It's self-explanatory. But with like Moment Feed, you have to really stack that up front and just showcase like who we are, like what cool problems we're solving and what we're doing. And then I go into like finding out more about the candidate. Whereas with FabFitFun, I'll probably dive into like wanting to know more about the candidate. But, there's pros and cons for both. Like with FabFitFun, the volume is, quite crazy in terms of like the applications, the messages that I'm getting, because there are so many fans of the brand. And, myself being a brand ambassador and really connecting with like why people love it so much. And it's hard because you're disappointing people at some points, whether it be through applications, the interview process, and you want to make sure you can't hire, unfortunately, everybody. So there will be times when you are rejecting or not able to move forward with people that are such huge fans of the brand. So it's just trying to be very authentic as possible and building that relationship with that person, whether it be an applicant, candidate, that no matter what the circumstances, that you aren't damaging the brand or their belief in the brand.
Yeah, that's got to be a challenge. So, I mean, when you do bring somebody on site, and obviously, the brand's well recognized, if someone is a fan and obviously, things don't work out and you got to, reject the candidate, how is that conversation? Like, how careful are you, obviously, because, you mentioned strong brand, you don't want to damage it. Like, how careful do you have to be? Do you put extra stress on it versus maybe other positions you previously had?
Definitely, I try to be as more over communicative as possible. And like with anything, like authenticity is super important to me in the recruiting process. Like overall, doesn't matter the company, the candidate. I just think authenticity is really key. We've all been in opportunities where we're applying for jobs or have family members that are going through the process. And I never liked when people try to, do the whole playing game. So it's like, I think with authenticity, that's just when you're leading with that, you can only hope that people can respect that and understand. And naturally, I'm a very empathetic person. So I try to really like tailor that in my communication as well, trying to make it very personalized and just really trying to just get the message home in a very like fair, concise way of why at this moment it's not a good fit. I always try to offer suggestions of, other things that might make sense or other companies. Sometimes if I do know that they are a fan of the brand, we'll go an extra step and maybe do a separate phone call, leaving them a voicemail, just really leaving that personalized touch so they feel that, we close the loop. That's like, okay, like that they can understand of, why we made that decision, whether it be on an application or throughout the interview process. And just making sure that they feel like it wasn't left like unsaid of like, oh, they never got back to me, or I just got a canned response.
How many people ask for a product discount through that process? I'm just kidding.
Wow. You know what? To be honest, like no one.
Okay. I just thought about it. I'm like, yeah, you guys have a coupon code you can send me to subscribe.
I mean, we thought about that in terms of we haven't implemented it yet because I didn't know how, like, I don't know if someone was getting rejected and then they're like, well, here's the coupon code. Like, would they think that's like silly or like, would they appreciate that? Like, who knows? But when candidates do come on site throughout the process for interviews, we do gift them a box so they can really get the look and feel, especially for people who haven't received the box or seen it before, of just getting to understand that magic of opening the box, seeing the products, touching the products, and seeing that unboxing.
So cool. Yeah, I think to have the brand behind you and to be able to have, I guess, 9 out of 10 or whatever the metric is of people responding, because at least they're, familiar, whether it's, a spouse or somebody directly using it, whoever that is. I think that's such a huge advantage in the recruiting process versus, we talk about, in the Bay Area, companies are littered. And how do you determine one versus the other without brand? And in your case, you guys have a clear differentiator of that strength.
Exactly.
So what happens when, I guess somebody comes on site? Have you had the case, and I'm just curious because you might have this happen or not have, but what happens when somebody comes on and they have a bad experience? Have you seen like someone actually go negative towards the brand? Has that ever happened? Like maybe it's a position where they thought they were going to get it, just went sideways. Is that something that you guys worry about?
Yes, more and more, like we're trying to be very proactive about that. And it hasn't necessarily happened yet where someone has had a negative experience and they have been very upfront to be like, well, I'm going to cancel my membership, et cetera. So we haven't had that, but we've had people in general who the experience hasn't gone their way. And obviously it won't for everybody, where they have gone to Glassdoor and shared their grievances. And, I do think we are in this like Yelp generation where people want to feel heard. And it's mostly when something isn't going their way that they feel like they have to be seen and like let that out, that if something they didn't move on. It's never really the people that get hired or having positive experiences that go out of their way to leave, positive reviews. And so we've been trying to be very proactive about that candidate feedback overall. We do use the applicant tracking system Greenhouse, and we've started to implement candidate surveys. They are anonymous to offer candidates and applicants an opportunity to leave feedback that way. Instead of being like, I want my voice to be heard, I'm going to proactively go to Glassdoor and leave a review.
So to speak about Glassdoor for a second, I'm always curious what strategies everyone has. Everyone's slightly different. Do you guys have a Glassdoor strategy? I mean, if you do, could you kind of go into how you work with it? Because I know the squeaky wheel, is the big concern on Glassdoor, but what's the strategy over there?
That is something we're still figuring out. And if anything, I think like as we've been in hyper growth, like the interview process has had to grow and scale and evolve like crazy because sometimes it is chaos. But, while sometimes Glassdoor can be difficult with the squeaky wheel getting the grease, sometimes we can use it to our benefit as we are going through this hyper growth with working with hiring managers. And maybe if sometimes the feedback isn't like getting across, we're able to be like, look, this did matter to the candidate. They put it on a Glassdoor review online. So that has been something that we've been able to use a little bit to a benefit. But as we're scaling, we're still figuring out how we can evolve that strategy and process. And also trying to figure out ways to authentically invite employees to leave feedback and making sure that it's like anonymous, that they know that it's anonymous in different stages of the process, whether it be their first week, their first few days, first 90 days, and connecting with them. It's like, the interview process is still fresh in your mind. We want to hire great people like yourself. We would love if you could leave any candid feedback about your experience. So trying those ways to outweigh the squeaky wheels and having more authentic feedback on there.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, and I think that's the one thing I've been noticing speaking with different individuals like Glassdoor. There seems to be an evolving strategy always, but always trying to take some of the data points from those reviews and kind of pulling them back, into the manager's purview to kind of make sure everyone's aware of whatever's there because it's out there. Like I think the one thing that I've always been concerned about Glassdoor is it is anonymous. Like I could write a FabFitFun review and nothing keeps me from doing that. So that's the one thing that's a little bit challenging, but it is one of the biggest tools out there and it is what it is.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like some people do recognize that. Like, again, the same with Yelp. Like, I'm always like, when I'm looking at Yelp reviews for a certain restaurant, I try to like weigh the good and the bad and like, okay, like this person clearly had a negative experience. And then it's just seeing people who made it, like just trying to really get the full picture and understanding that, this might be a very skewed response. It might not be the full picture.
I actually, tell my employees, let's talk about the Glassdoor with candidates up front if it's not good and go through what we've learned from the client, the hiring managers and explain maybe why there was a deficiency. So to me, I'm a big fan of, you guys have a pretty decent rating, but we deal with some that are actually in the twos and that gets tricky to
Oh,
have a
no.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are rough, but I was going to ask you something popped into my head that I thought I just wanted to cover with you. I know we weren't going to talk about diversity and inclusion, but obviously, with the product, you guys are obviously targeting a particular demographic, market segment. Is there a need to be a strategy for diversity at FabFitFun, or is it just organically happen because of the product? Like, what's, I guess, going on over there in that side?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really unique. Like when I've gone to other conferences or meetups that do have the topic of diversity with FabFitFun, I'm able to share a very like unique response because yeah, it is a product. It's a women's lifestyle box and membership. And our challenges are different. I remember when I hired my first male on our content and creative team, it was a team of 10 females and hiring our first guy on the team was a huge diversity win. Because diversity is just also so many different things. We also, when I first started, one of the co-founders and co-CEOs had went to Stanford, and we had a lot of Stanford alumni that were here. So it's okay. There's also like diversity of thought and having like other different types of educational backgrounds here. And also when I first started, it was a very young company and just like diversity of experience or diversity of, with FabFitFun, we are a subscription model and it was very easy given like our geographical region and just like timing that we had a lot of people come from the Honest company that had a subscription component as well. And we had just so many people from the Honest company. So a different diversity of experience that way. Everyone can't be female coming from Stanford from the Honest company, so trying to find very unique ways of diversifying what we're looking to bring in for diversity of thought, background, and experience.
So on the flip side, I'm always a fan of the inclusion part of it. I went through your LinkedIn in terms of companies. That's a really diverse group of people you guys have. For that big a group, like what do you guys do for inclusivity? Again, knowing, your product skews a certain way, what do you guys do internally to make sure there's different things for different people?
I think something as we're going through the hypergrowth, that's what we're still figuring out. Over the past 6 months, our people operations team has definitely tripled in size. And recently we did implement an HRBP function as well as a learning and organizational development function. So I think like a lot of times with the overall business, it's a lot going on, a lot of chaos and change and hypergrowth, keeping head above water, especially with the seasonality of the business. So a lot going on with business needs. So we've really, over the past 6 months, have been trying to find that balance and making sure we're offering all these additional types of resources where people do feel like that inclusion. So that's something that we're still figuring out, but we've built a really strong people ops team to help us do that.
So you started at 50 some, you guys have scaled well over 600. What did you see like annually? How many people were you hiring? Like you guys going from year 1, year 2, year 3?
I mean, it's just been like the wild, wild west. It really just doubled in size year after year. And it's just like crazy to think like, it went from like 200 to 400, 400, and now hopefully to 800. And just thinking about like when we started the year at almost like 400 employees, like reflecting how much it took just to get to 400 employees and thinking about like, now we have to get like another 400 on top of it by the end of the year. And just like how much, work that went into that and how much volume and just like making sure that we're still finding the right culture fit through that hypergrowth. It was a lot, especially since, early on the recruiting team was pretty lean. For the longest time, it really was just 3 or 4 individuals. Now we have scaled to about 12 individuals. So that definitely helps with the hypergrowth. But, for a while it was everyone all in trying to help make this growth happen. And I think it really was like after the 200 mark where I was like, wow, this is different. in the sense of like things needed to change and the company was changing and we needed to implement different types of processes and procedures to scale.
How dynamic was the headcount planning? Because obviously, I mean, hiring that many people, were you guys looking at it quarterly? Was it semi-annually, annually? Like how frequently were you guys actually reevaluating just the growth plan?
Man, I wish there was some structure around that, at least back in like the early days. Like now, like we are working on an annual organized plan, and we strive to do that this year as well. But I think that we're still working out a lot of the kinks and figuring out what that looks like and putting that in place. But I think for 2020, which we've already started working on, like that process with like, the approvals and like planning, it's much more clear. Before it was very much ad hoc. Like I think we had some ideas in terms of what we would want annually in the past, but the business changes so much. It really changes not only every quarter, every season, but it was month to month of really reevaluating what was needed, what shifts that were going in certain departments, and how we had to reprioritize.
It is a crazy number. I mean, close to 500 plus 600 people in 3 years. I was half curious if there was. I didn't actually think there would be a plan. I was like, maybe they had some plan. I have not heard. Like I talked to a guy who helped scale MongoDB and similar people, and it's always there is no time for a plan. It just changes so fast that even if you had one, it would
exactly
be the next day almost. So that's exactly what I kind of thought would be the case. I guess when we first talked, we talked about recruiting marketing, and I know you touched employer brand. I want to kind of go back to that real quick. And when it comes to the actual recruiting side and your spend on different media, like how are you targeting your job board, knowing your strength of brand? Is there strategy, or is it just because the brand's strong across the board, you guys don't have to solve for that?
So I think that's an excellent question because yes, our brand is very strong and it does attract a good number of people and volume and a lot of times really strong, unique candidates. But also on the flip side of that, people know us, they think of us as fun, women's lifestyle, e-commerce, but a lot of people don't really think of us as a tech company. So on the tech side, having to really try to find different employer branding ways to showcase what we are doing in that aspect. So for with tech, partnering with Built in LA, which had been a really exciting partnership for us, and being able to work on a lot of the content pieces, whether they be articles, events, videos, photos, showcasing specifically what we were doing with data and tech and engineering and product, and a lot of wow, we had no idea. And also, for the longest time, I feel with FabFitFun, it was kind of a best kept secret. Everyone's recognized us, oh yeah, the cute box company. But oh, well, did you know the cute box company raised $80 million this past January, or that we're working with these large brands, or that we have over 1 million members, or that we doubled in size year after year. So a lot of people that don't necessarily recognize that. And also thinking about the LA market, it is, while it's ever changing, historically, obviously a very entertainment focused city. So with the retail environment, also having to think about how we can brand the company merchandising wise to those larger retail companies, whether they be in New York, the Midwest, Seattle, of hey, we're not this cute little box company. We're doing some really cool things with merchandising, retail, inventory, logistics operations that, we would love for you to solve. And have you thought about moving to LA? So those are some of the problems we've been trying to solve.
I love the story. I think it's pretty cool. Just using the brand, knowing, you still actually can add on top, 80 million in funding. You guys have a big tech department, which, maybe some people looking at the product would not recognize that, but I think that's all really makes for a fantastic. It's got to be an amazing day-to-day recruiting experience, kind of going through the process. And I was going to ask you, what is the biggest pain point? So a lot of positives, what's the biggest challenge you see, right now? You obviously have scaled 600 people in the last couple of years. What is the thing that you're if I could solve this?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think the overall pain point right now is just change, and change is neither good nor bad. It just is. And it's just the frequency and the volume of the change, in the sense that, it's just every day and it feels like everything. So it kind of feels like everything is breaking, and there's just a lot to keep up with the hyper growth of not only our talent acquisition team, our people operations team that's tripled in size, then the company that is just ever changing week after week. Like you have an idea of like, okay, this is our plan, this is what everyone's working on. Then the next day it could completely change. So there's not necessarily a constant. And for some people that is very fun, and it very much is. But it's also thinking about how we can go through that constant, figuring out how we can scale and evolve and put processes in place. Because what works one day isn't going to work the next day. So it's trying to be as futuristic as possible of like, okay, this works now. Like, is this going to work in a month or in a couple of months or next year? So like that's been difficult, but it's funny. I always equate it to a Britney Spears song. Like, we're not a girl, like not yet a woman. We're not just startup. We're not some like big corporation either with all these like structured processes in place. And so it's really figuring out when we have to be more nimble and really flexible, like a girl, and being like, okay, like we just need to be flexible and agile and do it like this. It's not best practice, but we need to make it work because the business is moving fast. So we got to move. And then it's also at that same time trying to figure out, like, okay, like we do need to be best practice, like moving forward with this, or at least try to. And as like we've hit like now over 600, 650, and as like the team is getting larger in different offices, and it's been such a fun, wild ride. So if anyone can figure out change, I would love to, hear from them. But we've been taking it one day at a time.
Wow. As a manager there, how do you help your team cope with that? So I mean, that's got to be, a lot coming at you. You've got to obviously manage the team. Like, how do you help with that piece of just the pace of change?
Again, like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's tough. It's something that we try to figure out day to day. But, with that, like, I think like the first thing is it's not taking ourselves so seriously. Like we're not curing cancer, like we're FabFitFun, like we're delivering happiness to our members and employees. Fun is in our name. So it's just trying to find the fun in it and just realizing like, okay, like we can do this. It's not the end of the world. If something breaks or, we can figure it out together. So just trying to find that balance of that and keeping our head above water. Also just trying to implement priorities as much as possible, like knowing what the largest priorities are and if, what is lower on the totem pole and what might have some wiggle room to not be best practice. But it's really the attitude and the energy in the office every day. It's being empathetic and understanding that I know it's hard, that things are changing. This wasn't what I said yesterday. But, that's something that we're very upfront with in our recruiting process for our own team is people that can handle that. And, it's not for everyone, but it's just trying to find the fun and the flexibility.
Cool. I like it. That's fantastic. I was just looking to see, we've covered a bunch. I'm cognizant of time. I did mention that I like to kind of, pretty unstructured, a couple of questions towards the end. I did want to cover in terms of, your general advice for recruitment. You've been internal for quite a bit of time. You made the pivot. You've been internal for a while. If someone's just starting out in the industry, is there anything you look back and you have in terms of advice or you wish someone had told you early on that would have helped you along the way?
Yeah. And I think this for, anyone in any sort of industry, and, sometimes cliche, but, that is what it is. But, comparison is the thief of joy, that it's, really hard to not compare yourself to others and like where you're at in terms of, like, oh, all my other friends are directors or all my other friends are managing people. And I'm just like, quote unquote, just like an individual contributor. It's like, no, like everyone has a different path and a different journey and different companies are different. And it's just really figuring out what is working for you and knowing that like your journey is going to be different than other people's journeys. Some people might have a fast track to something, but then they just level out. Other people, it might be a slow start and then it just like, boom, it moves. And I think just really, and this is something like Straits as well, is just like really thinking about the opportunity and the environment and not the title. Like I do understand that people are very sometimes driven by title, but I had an old boss told me that, and she had picked it up from a Sheryl Sandberg book, that, when you're asked to get on a rocket ship, like you don't ask like, oh, well, what seat is it? Like, you're just like, cool, like I'm on the rocket ship. And sometimes people can get so like engrossed in the title. I'm like, well, I'm a director here. I want to be a director there. It's like, well, you were a director at a 50-person company. This is a like 600-person company. It's not always going to like equate the same. So just like being like open and flexible to your own journey and like what that means to you.
I wish more people would not focus on title alone and would look at what Yeah, it depends what stage you're at, but I do see, talking to candidates, a lot of times the title becomes, I actually had a candidate not take a job that was perfect for them. Like love the job and just wouldn't, said if they can't negotiate for the specific title, I won't take it. And I was like, I don't know if this is the right role for you. If that's how granular you need. And I actually talked to the CTO and I was like, to be honest with you, I don't know if this person would have fit your team because I could see like this would have been trouble. So I agree. That's a good one. So you were literally in a probably chaotic environment. I mentioned productivity. We kind of chatted about that. I'm now curious, like, what do you do to just keep it organized? I don't know if you're a paper person, you're a digital person, you make checklists, but what's the little secret way of you keeping track of your day?
Yeah. So with productivity, it's something that I'm really like so curious about. I'm always trying to find ways to be more optimal, to be better, especially in this like fast moving train of FabFitFun. One of my favorite podcasters and, influencers is Lauren Everts from the Skinny Confidential. So I'm always looking to see what she's recommending about productivity. For me, it's a lot of time blocking and finding ways to, and I think that's how I best like segment my mind in terms of like, okay, I'm going to look at resume, like this block is going to be for resumes, or this block is going to be even separating it by position. Sometimes that just gets me like in the mode of like, okay, because like I'm focusing on like our merchandising teams and our marketing teams. It's like, all right, I'm going to focus on this email marketing for an hour to do like my resumes there and just getting in the mind of like email marketing, CRM, like all of that. And then like also maybe doing in that time block, like my phone screens for email marketing. So for me, that makes sense in the overall flow. I also love to, equate like with the time blocks, like sometimes like music, it's like, okay, like if I have this like limit of, I'm going to listen to this one album start to finish, like that is the only time I have to do resumes. And like when that's done, it's done, hands clean, on to the next thing. And I know that as like a timing of like, okay, when the album is over, I need to move on. So I like to do something like that, or I have like certain playlists for like reviewing resumes. But in terms of overall to-do list, I am still a paper person. And sometimes like I didn't like my handwriting, so I would like type my to-do list and then print it and then use that as a checklist. But I also have my notebook and I have it separated in terms of like the day-to-day, what I'm hoping to accomplish. And I do, for me, to better ingrain it and like get refocused, I do rewrite the to-do list every day and not just like this one big master to-do list and check off. And then once that's done, do a new one. And I've been trying, not always the best at it, of just if I get these like top 3 priorities are for that day, that no matter what, if I did those top 3 things, like I'm good. And then lastly, and this is something that I got from Gretchen Rubin, she's the author of The Happiness Project, to do the hardest things first. Because like when you have something hard and then like I'm delaying it all day and then it like gets into my mind and then I get anxious and I'm like, oh, putting it off. And then it like never happens and I push it to the next day. But like when you do your hardest things first, it's like, phew, that's done. You actually get it done. It's like, okay, that wasn't so bad. And then you can just move on to the other stuff.
So cool. I literally was like, she's describing my workflow. I was like, has she been like secretly watching? No, I'm kidding. How I work. I love everything digital except my to-do. I put it in a notebook like you. I time block. I put a top 3 and then I hand copy all the other additional stuff that's not done from day to day. So I'm like, it's that pain of rewriting it. I'm like, is this really important for me? Because I'm like rewriting this every day. It makes me re-examine it. And then The Happiness Project is next on my Audible to read.
Oh, it's so good. I've like purchased it for so many people.
Very nice. Awesome. I'm looking. Yeah, it's actually literally queued up. I'm listening to the end of the last 30 minutes of Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is a fantastic listen. But Happiness Project's queued up next. So I'm super excited now to listen to it.
Enjoy.
I just want to say thanks for being on. I mean, literally the time flew and just learning about what you guys are doing specifically at FabFitFun, but just your background's been fantastic. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So excited to be here and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I know you gave us some social links. We'll put it out there. People might reach out to you for follow-up questions, but all those links will be accessible in the show notes. Any other questions that somebody has for a follow-up, a podcast segment, any topics you want us to cover? I mean, let me know because I'm keeping a tally and list of what those are to kind of dive into other areas. And please leave any type of feedback for this podcast. I'd like to hear more. And thank you very much. Thanks, Angela.